Greetings everyone from wherever you're watching. My name is Priscilla Chamenyi. I am a junior data scientist for global communities in the Laboratory of Data Science at Purdue University, Fort Wayne. In this series of lecture videos, we'll be discussing unsupervised learning algorithms, which is a type of machine learning model. Now, machine learning models are computer programs that use machine learning algorithms to recognize patterns in data or make predictions. These algorithms are trained using labeled, unlabeled, or mixed data set. Now, today we're going to start by discussing what unsupervised learning algorithm is, and then we'll take a look at the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning algorithm, and then we'll end the discussion by looking at two algorithms under unsupervised learning, that is k-means and PCA. Let's dig right into it. So, unsupervised learning machine model identifies patterns in data without prior labeling. As I said, some of the trainings are done with unlabeled or labeled data. So this type of learning is with unlabeled data. And these learning algorithms analyze unlabeled data independently. In contrast to supervised learning machine model, it uses these learning algorithms are used on labeled data sets. So, for example, an area in which you'll be using unsupervised learning machine model is when you want to do a customer segmentation for a bank, for instance. And an area where you want to use a supervised learning machine model is when you'd want to be able to predict the type of tumor per se. So I hope that helps clarify the difference between unsupervised learning and supervised learning. Let's move right into k-means clustering, which is a type of unsupervised learning algorithm. Now, k-means partitions n data points into predefined k clusters, and these k clusters are user specified. It works by iteratively assigning each data point to one of these k clusters. And the goal of the algorithm is to minimize the sum of squared distances between the data points and their respective cluster centroids. A good cluster will be one for which the within cluster variation is as small as possible. That implies that, yes, this clustering is good because the distances between the data points are small. So the mathematical expression for the within cluster variation, which is often defined using Euclidean distance, is given as follows, where ck is denoting the number of observations in the kth cluster we are talking about. And then we have an optimization problem, which I said that the goal was to minimize the sum of squared distances. So the goal is to minimize your within cluster variation to give a small distance as much as possible. Okay, so the advantages of k-means is that it's a straightforward algorithm and it is relatively simple to use. And it also scales to very large data sets, and we are guaranteed convergence. And then can also be applied to a wide range of data types, including numerical and categorical data. Its disadvantage is that the number of k clusters must be specified manually by the user, and it can be very difficult to determine if your data is complex. It is also sensitive to initial choice of centroids and can lead to different results each time it is run. Clustering, it also clusters outliers, and the algorithm always assumes that their clusters are spherical in shape, which may not always be. Okay, so now this is k-means algorithm being implemented in R. Here's where we install the packages, and this is where I manually set how many clusters I want for this data set. And this is where I plotted my visualization here. So this data is a cancer data that is having types of things that will tell whether this cancer is malignant or benign, and I clustered my data. I said it should have two clusters. Now you realize that we said that k-means does not anytime you run k-means, you're going to get different results. So to avoid that, I set seed in R. So this is showing us the two different clusters, all the ones in blue, cluster 2, and all the ones in red, cluster 1. Now you can change the number of clusters you want when you decide to do so. Okay, so the next algorithm we'll be looking at is principal component analysis. And PCA is a dimensionality reduction technique. It transforms high data dimensional data into low dimensional space. So when you have a large data set in a very high dimensional space, PCA is very useful. The main goal of PCA is to identify underlying structure in the data and extract the most significant features and reduce noise and complexity of the data. Now, how does PCA work? It identifies components of data which are linear combinations of original features capturing most data variation. Now, these components are ranked by contribution to total variance, and depending on the number of the size of your data set, you can have your first principal component, second principal component, till P principal components if your data set is an N by P data set. Okay, so your first principal component is the linear combination given below, the linear combination of your variables in your data set, and your Z1 is your score for your first principal component, and your phi1, phi2, phi P1 are your normalized loadings. Again, we have an optimization problem below here. Now, the second principal component is also a linear combination seen below here. This has the score associated Z2, and your phi12, phi22 are your normalized loadings, this time around of your second principal component. And further principal components like Z3, Z4 can be computed and defined in the same way, only that your first principal component will be orthogonal to your second principal component. So what the variance, when you have your first principal component, will explain an amount of variance in your data. Your second principal component will explain the rest of, will capture the rest of your variance that has not been explained by your first principal component, and it moves on and on and on. So advantages of PCA is that it offers linearity and computational efficiency. It is scalable for large data set and can be used for feature selection. So when you have a lot of variables, you can use PCA to reduce the number of variables for your model. And it is also sensitive to the scale of the features. That's the disadvantage. It is very sensitive to the scale of the features, and its assumption of linearity and normality may lead to information loss sometimes. Now, this is PCA being implemented in R. So this is the code. Again, you install your packages and then you do this. Now, this script plot is just has a technique called the elbow method, which allows you to identify the optimal number of principal components for your data set. So at the place where the elbow lies, for me, here is 2. So this is saying that my optimal number of principal components for my data set should be 2. So these are your principal component scores, your Z1 for PC1, Z2 for PC2, and so on and so forth. Okay, yeah. So this brings us to the end of today's lecture. I hope you learned something new, if not new, something helpful. This class was supported by the Laboratory of Data Science and Indiana Data Mine Grants, and is supervised by Professor Alessandro Selvitella, Purdue University, Fort Wayne. Thank you for your time and attention. Till we meet again. Bye.